Rajajanarandana Yasodanandana Rajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Ashtara Srishla A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Shri Gonitai Ki, Shri Jagannath Baladev Shabada Ki, Grantarashimad Bhagavatam Ki, Gaura Premanandi. All glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to Shri Guru and Gauranga Gosha Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhatale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gaudavani Pacharine Nirvasesha Sanyari Pastachade Shatai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 24, text number 29. Swadharma Nishtaha Shatajanma Bihi Puman Virinchitam Eti Tataha Param I Mam Avyakritam Bhagavataha Atha Vaishnavam Padam Yata Aham Vubudaha. It's interesting. Kala Atyaye Sadamanishta Shatajanma Puman Virinchatameti Tatak Param Himam Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam Padang Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Puman Virinchatameti Tatak Param Himam Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam Padam Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Puman Virinchatameti Tatak Param Himam Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam Padang Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye
Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Puman
Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Puman
Virinchatameti Tata Param Himam
Virinchatameti Tatak Param Himam
Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam
Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam
Padam Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye
Padam Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye
Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Puman
Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Puman
Virinchatameti Tata Param Himam
Virinchatameti Tatak Param Himam
Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam
Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam
Padam Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye
Padang Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye
Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Puman
Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Puman Virinchatameti Tatak Param Himam
Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam
Avyakritam Bhagavato Tavaishnavam
Padam Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye
Padang Yataham Vibhuda Kalatyaye. Ladies. Ladies. Swadharmanishta shatajanmami puman Virinchatameti tatak param himam Avyakritam bhagavato ta vaishnavam
Padam yataham
vibhuda Swadharma nishtaha, one who is situated in his own dharma or occupation. Shata janma bihi, for 100 births. Puman, a living entity. Virinchatam, the post of Lord Brahma. Eti, gets. Tataha, thereafter. Param, above. He, certainly. Mam, attains me. Avya kritam, without deviation. Bhagavataha, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ata, therefore. Vaishnavam, a pure devotee of the Lord. Padam, post. Yata, as. Aham, I. Vu Buddha, demigods. Kala atyaye, after the annihilation of the material world. A translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. A person who executes his occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Brahma. And if he becomes more qualified, he can approach Lord Shiva. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. Purport. This verse gives an idea of the highest perfection of the evolutionary process. As described by the Vaishnava poet Jayadev Goswami, Pulaya payodi jale dvitavanasti vedam. Let us begin tracing the evolutionary process from the point of devastation, Pulaya, when the whole universe is filled with water. At that time, there are many fishes and other aquatics. And from these aquatics evolve creepers, trees, etc. From these insects and reptiles evolve, and from them birds, beasts, and then human beings, and finally civilized human beings. Now the civilized human being is at a junction where he can make further evolutionary progress in spiritual life. Here it is stated for Dharma Nishta that when a living entity comes to a civilized form of life, there must be Svadharma, social divisions according to one's work and qualifications. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvanyam maya shrishtam gunakama vibhagasha. According to the 3 modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the 4 divisions of human society were created by me. In civilized human society there must be the divisions of Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, and everyone must properly execute his occupational duty in accordance with his division. Here it is described for Dharma Nishta that it does not matter whether one is a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra. If one sticks to his position and properly executes his particular duty, he is considered a civilized human being. Otherwise he is no better than an animal. It is also mentioned herein that whoever executes his occupational duties for Dharma for 100 births, for instance, if a Brahmin continues to act as a Brahmana, becomes eligible to promotion to Brahmaloka, the planet where Lord Brahma lives. There is also a planet called Shivaloka, or Sadashivaloka, which is situated in a marginal position between the spiritual and material worlds. If after being situated in Brahmaloka one becomes more qualified, he is promoted to Sadashivaloka. Similarly, when one becomes even more qualified, he can attain the Vaikuntha Loka. The Vaikuntha Lokas are targets for everyone, even the demigods, and they can be attained by a devotee who has no desire for material benefit. As indicated in Bhagavad Gita 8:16, one does not escape material miseries even if he is elevated to Brahma Loka. Abrahma bhuvanal loka punar avatinarjuna. Similarly, one is not very safe even if he is promoted to Shiva Loka, because the planet of Shiva Loka is marginal. However, if one attains Vaikuntha Loka, he attains the highest perfection of life and the end of the evolutionary process. Mamapetya tu konteha punarjamana vidyate. In other words, it is confirmed herein that a person in human society who has developed consciousness must take to Krishna consciousness in order to be promoted to Vaikuntha Loka or Krishna Loka immediately after leaving the body. Chatvadeham punarjanma naiti mamiti sorjuna. A devotee who is fully in Krishna consciousness, who is not attracted by any other loka or planet, including Brahma Loka and Shiva Loka, is immediately transferred to Krishna Loka, mameti. That is the highest perfection of life and the perfection of the evolutionary process. Translation again: a person who executes his occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Brahma, and if he becomes more qualified, he can approach Lord Shiva. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. And not to be misunderstood by this statement, occupy the post of Brahma. Because Prabhupada clarifies in the purport, one attains that place of Lord Brahma, wherever Brahmalok, and not that one becomes, there is a Lord Brahma, presumably, ruling the universe. It's not like we bump him off his seat. I'm now the new Brahma, off you go. I perform my duties for 100 births, and a day later someone else comes along and bumps us off. They did theirs too. Of course, there's unlimited universes and always coming and going, etc. But Prabhupada clarifies pretty much from what's written in the purport that it means to attain the planet of Lord Brahma. And it's also understood here, it says, can approach Lord Shiva, the second part. Not become Lord Shiva, approach him. Of course, the jiva can become Brahma. This is another, you could say, interesting topic, to say the least. How the jiva becomes Brahma. In some places, Prabhupada says, like Brahma, with a mentality of Brahma when we enter into the universe. Either way, in this particular case, it appears that it means the one attains the place of Lord Brahma, not the position of Lord Brahma. In this particular purport, it's interesting to note also here in the verse, it's describing more, let's say, elevation in terms of consciousness, as well, of course, as the apparent external forms. But in the purport, Prabhupada does, more or less, you could say, in terms of describing the development after pralaya, after destruction, after the majority of the universe is submerged in water, how the various species come about. It may seem a little contradictory sometimes to other descriptions, but here we see Darwinism theory, almost you could say, being presented practically from the fish, from the ocean, come insects and this thing and that thing, and then birds and this and that. It's not exactly an evolution in terms of the way that Darwin concludes, you may say. This is just the procedure that the Lord has for occupying the universe. It's a systematic arrangement of the Lord. But the main point of this particular verse and the particular purport is the performance of one's prescribed duties. Whether it's for those who wish a spiritual elevation or those who are aspiring for material elevation. the performance of prescribed duties in the human form of life. And Prabhupada mentions here, if there's not such an arrangement, then it's not really human life at all, it's animal life. Animal life with no specific goal or objective in life at all. And the purpose of human life is to ultimately please Lord Hari, Samsidam Haritoshnam. But that is not usually the case, even in so-called society which has some remnant of Varna Ashram. It's usually for material elevation or material purposes. Here also is indicated that if it's organized like this, according to the Vedic system of Dharma, Swadharma in this world, material occupation that is, then one can gain elevation to heavenly planets, which is oftentimes the goal of even those in religious life, so to speak, to gain elevation to heaven. So the proper system for that is to perform us. Just like in spiritual life, there are three ways or three paths of perfection, in the sense of Nityasiddha is already inferring that one's eternally situated in that spiritual position, you could say. And then there's sadhana siddha, practice of devotional regulated program to gradually elevate our consciousness for eligibility for advancement and ultimately spiritual realization. And then there's kripa siddha, which is mercy. So we see those also, in a sense, at least the two of them, in the material endeavor to elevate. You see, for instance, persons who adhere to Christianity, now I'm not saying it works across the board, but the principle is that they take shelter of the mercy of Jesus Christ as their only redemption, their only saving grace. They're not practicing, in most cases, very much sadhana. They're just taking shelter of mercy. Now, whether that actually is not as cheap as it sounds, there's more to it than that. But in principle, that's the idea. The sadhana siddha is performing all kinds of strict scriptural, not just concocted, but scriptural practices recommended to attain spiritual realization or spiritual world. So these different paths, even those who are on the path of religiosity, two aspects are there also: divine mercy and following strictly various tapasyas or whatever it may be. Sometimes a combination of the two is recommended also. Generally that's the case. In the case in which we're, you could say, as aspiring devotees, Vaishnava, whatever, more or less that's our situation. We follow a Nityasiddha, and under the direction of a Nityasiddha we perform sadhana, regulated devotional service. But the effects of that are depending entirely on the mercy of the Lord. So all three are in place, there's not exactly one or the other. We associate with a Nityasiddha and we follow their instructions. And by following their instructions, one evokes the mercy of Krishna, the kripa, the mercy of the Lord. As we know, by the mercy of Krishna one gets a spiritual master, by the mercy of the spiritual master one gets Krishna. That's how the mercy works. The final, we've just finished the month of Damodara, or the month of Kartika. This famous story, and you've probably all heard it 100 times and more, how Mother Yasoda tries to bind Krishna, but by her effort alone, it's not enough. She has to have the, Krishna's mercy. And Krishna's mercy, thus she was able to bind Krishna. Otherwise, try as she may, it didn't work. So both factors are generally in play. Prabhupada said that at one time, his mercy is the instructions which he gives. And if we follow those, we get Krishna's mercy. Now in this purport, let's see. And that way they can be elevated. The Lord is not usually interested, although Prabhupada did say one time, problem with my disciples is they want to go to heaven. And there's a bit of that, I'm sure there's a bit of that, and we may not consciously be aware of it. But that's the enjoying spirit, the desire to enjoy or be comfortable in the material world and so on. And that becomes a kind of almost like a motive. predominant motive. It may well be we want to enjoy heavenly delights, without suffering materially, at least for some time. But the emphasis placed here is mentioned in the verse, I think. There's the verse here. No, it's not. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna. Oh, yes, it is. Or Vishnu in unalloyed. It doesn't say alloyed. Unalloyed devotional service. So if we're in alloyed, in other words, mixed devotional service, when it's not, divine mercy can do anything, but when it's not eligible to enter Vaikuntha, or the spiritual realm, or maybe eligible, Prabhupada wrote, when Jayananda Prabhu left the world, that if he at all has any material desire, he's been elevated to the heavenly planets for some time, and from there he'll go back to Godhead. But then he said, actually, in the next letter, he confirmed that he's gone straight back to Godhead. So if we do have any material desires, then it's understood that there's a good chance we're going to have to spend another lifetime or more in the material world, if we're still embracing those desires. It's a good chance. I mean, mercy again, Prabhupada showered his mercy at one time, when he was, some say in Melbourne, maybe he did it in a few places, but he was saying it like this. He was saying, unless one's devotional service is 100% free of material desire, one has to remain in the material world. So the devotees were rather glum. They weren't very inspired. And Prabhupada looked around and looked at the dull, kind of rather morose-looking faces of the devotees, assuming that they all considered they still had material desires. And then Prabhupada said, all right, 90%. And they went down to 70, but nothing less than that. This is mercy. Prabhupada did the same thing with even japa in one sense. He initially indicated 64 rounds and ended up with 16, but no less. And he said, even that you cannot chant. So the mercy is there, but we can't take advantage in the wrong way of that mercy. Take it for granted and, oh, never mind. Make up all other kinds of philosophies in relationship to it. We have to follow that at least carefully and sincerely, instructions. And we should think, therefore, okay, 70%, let me see, now that means in the day, that means 17 hours of the day. And for 7 hours of the day, I can do something else, or be something else. Because Prabhupada said, even if 70%, that's not the idea. It means that we endeavor, sincerely endeavor, to attain unalloyed devotional service. And, with the help of others, with especially the spiritual master, even if we're not quite there may be some shortcoming, by the mercy of the pure devotees, we may be delivered. But not that we're systematically or, let's say, purposely, not making that endeavor, but rather maintaining with this idea that I'm, like in some religions, we are sinners and there's nothing we can do about it. We just depend on mercy. That's not the idea. That's something, but that's not enough. It's not enough. At least we have to make, if we know something's wrong, then we should make the sincere endeavor to adjust or to rectify the situation. We may not have the, whatever, particularly good samskaras, we may not have particularly good willpower, we may not be very strong, the material energy is very strong, and around us we're surrounded by others who are tempting us all the time not to go there, not to go on to pure devotional service, which is freed of all influence or all intentions for liberation, to speak of material attainment or becoming powerful in this material world. So, we may not quite be there, but we're cultivating. Anukulina Krishna Anushilanam. We're cultivating the Shilanam and Krishna Anushilanam. We're cultivating the process of bringing pleasure to Krishna by following in the footsteps of those pure devotees of the Lord. And if we sincerely stick to that, even though there's some unwanted baggage, by the mercy of the Lord, that will not be necessarily an obstacle. But if we're holding on to the obstacle, thinking it doesn't matter, etc., then, that's kind of offensive mentality, just like the seventh offense against the holy name, practically speaking. Chant the holy name, can perform sinful activities knowingly, and at the same time feel that, if I chant Hare Krishna, I'll be relieved from them. It is taking the name of the Lord in vain, as it says in the Bible. So that's not the process that will take. Bahujamma Karyadi Shravana Kirtana. Not even going to Brahmaloka necessarily, or Shivaloka. Because usually one gets a bit caught up when you go to these places. And that's why it's a little harder in the heavenly planets, because it's pretty cool up there. It's pretty, you can chill out quite nicely up there. Not in the snow of Mount St. Moritz or whatever it is, but another kind of pleasure. Everything's kind of seems to be, well, they say just like heaven on earth, so many different statements, you don't have to work or pay taxes and worry about all the things we have to worry about in this world right now. And, there's not nasty coronaviruses, and there's no coronavirus in the heavenly planets. And all these things. Occasionally there's some disturbance, you could say, which we hear about, some demons going to get a bit too close, or whatever. But basically speaking, from the material point of view, there's very little stress or distress. It's more or less material happiness for a long time. But that also comes to an end, as Prabhupada says here, Brahma, quotes Krishna's verse, Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaya Vartanarjuna, that even if we do go to Brahmaloka, it's still a place for birth and death. It's not our constitutional station. And that can be attained by performing one's duty according to Varnashram. But that's not our goal. The goal is not just to perform our duties. We see in Srimad Bhagavatam that Dharma Svadushita Pungsham Vishvaksena Katasana Padiyadi Devading Shama Eva Kevala. The occupational duties a man performs according to his position in society are only so much useless labor if they do not evoke loving devotional service to the personality of Godhead. A waste of time, just going around in a circle. Prabhupada would cite this as a symptom of a genuine religion. If you're not developing your attachment, your love, your faith, whatever, in God, genuinely speaking, then we're treading water, we're not really going anywhere. Many times devotees say something like that, we're just treading water. We do have to question what we're doing in those cases. Maybe we're doing something which is in the reason for that, so to speak. And then, atak pumbir dvija shreshta varnashrama vibhagasya svanusitasya dharmasya samsitera hitoshna. And whatever our position may be in the varnashram system or occupational system of human form of life, everything is meant for the Sangsitira Haritoshnam, for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the purpose of the human form of life, at least to make inquiry in this direction, that the human life is not meant for sense gratification. Kamasyanendriya patiya labo jiveti avda, jivasya tattva jignasa nartayas chaya karmabi. But human life is not meant for sense gratification. We should live, maintain our body healthy as we can without becoming too absorbed in it. But the goal of life ultimately is to become Krishna conscious by inquiring. Jivasya tattva jignash, one is supposed to inquire into the nature of the absolute, not the relative. We talking about in general. People in general spend almost exclusively their time inquiring into the nature of the relative, with very, very relative truth, with very, very little, if any, endeavor or even energy or any idea, even if there is some endeavor, as to what that is. There's no direction in society, there's no guidance, there's no structure to facilitate this inquiry. It becomes speculation at best. And there's no real authoritative path, clear path. If the absolute truth exists, knowledge of the absolute truth also exists. We don't need to speculate about its existence. It's already there. So that is the secret, you could say, of elevation, is to hear in this way from those who've heard, or those who know. Tadvidi pranipadena pariprashnena sevya ibidikshanti teganam gyaninas tadvidarshana. If we want elevation to the spiritual planets beyond birth and death in this world, to understand Krishna clearly and not speculatively, because a clear janma karma chame divyam evam yovidi tatvada. One who understands Krishna properly, in full, doesn't take birth again in this material world, but attains the spiritual realm. So that understanding, that's the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the verses are there. To understand that clearly, the secret is Tadvidi Pranipatena, Pariprashnena Sevya. You have to take shelter of a pure devotee of the Lord and follow their instructions, render service, hear from them, and so on. Because they can see the truth, they're not speculating. We're in the dark, we speculate about something, we can't see it. Prabhupada did once, at least, tell the story of the blind man. How many was it? 6 blind men of Hindustan or something. And they were all blind, and they came across an elephant, and each one of them is holding a different part of an elephant, and one of them's concluding the elephant is like a sword, because he's holding on to the tusk. Another one said it's like a tree, it's like holding on to the leg. Another one, the trunk, it's like a long rope. Another one, the ear, it's like a big floppy flag. Another one, the belly, it's like a big drum. Like another one, whatever it is. The tail was like a rope, the trunk maybe like a pipe or something. Everyone was holding a different part. No, it's a drum. No, it's not, it's a rope. And partly everyone's in the right, but they're all in the wrong. No one's got the proper picture because they're blind, they can't see. One who's seen the truth can see it. And they can see the different stages leading to it. There's a Vedic system, there's a God-given system, step-by-step system. There's a slow path, fast track also. Just like in the airport, you have the fast track, or you can queue up for 6 hours trying to get through the bag check or whatever it is. I know what it's like in Zurich, but in some places it's a nightmare. Or you go through the fast track, you have to pay a little extra, but you get through quick. So like that, there's a fast track, just surrender to the pure devotee and follow what they say. And there's a slow track, you go through the system, birth after birth and birth, 100 births, performing your duty perfectly, and you reach Brahmaloka. But you've only reached Brahmaloka, you haven't reached Vaikuntha. It's still in the material world. And after 100 years of serious, strict practice of proper Varnashram Dharma, you've reached Brahmaloka. Congratulations. You can stay there for a while, then you have to go back and start again unless you become elevated still further. It's almost, you could say, what's the point of it? What's the point of it? Well, the point is made clear when we get this opportunity to associate with one who knows what the point of it is. Samsithira hitoshnam, to please the personality of Godhead by unalloyed devotional service. So if we're fortunate to be able to serve someone who has unalloyed devotional service, Shushushrosh Damasya, Vasudeva Gataruchi Syan Mahatsevaya Viprapunya Tirtana Shevanat. We have the opportunity to serve such a personality, then we're very, very fortunate. Because by serving such great personalities, great service is done. By such service, one develops an affinity or an attraction towards hearing about the personality of Godhead. This is the secret, crossing secret, as we know from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with Ramananda Roy, that cross point, Jnane Prayasam Pasta Namanta Evan, that this is the secret. Whatever situation one is in the Varnashram, if one has the opportunity to hear from a pure devotee of the Lord topics concerning Krishna, then one can, this is the turning point, this is the perfection of life, to have this opportunity. Perfection of life means, according to Varnashram, the opportunity to come to that platform. That's when real spiritual life begins. It's not just about elevating oneself through the system to a higher level, but to gain the eligibility to become liberated or freed from material birth and death, completely freed. By this hearing process, hearing from a pure devotee of the Lord, that hearing cleanses our heart and draws our attraction towards Krishna, and one evokes Krishna's mercy, Sridvatam Svakata Krishna Punyashravanakir Vidantyaksto Yabhadrani. All the abhadras or dirty things in the heart are cleansed by the Lord when he sees that we're developing an attraction for hearing and chanting about him. This is the simple nutshell process of, elevating us, or being elevated. We can't elevate ourselves exactly, but we can take to the process of elevation. It's our choice. But being elevated above conditional devotional service by associating with one who's transcendental or pure, and following their instructions, hearing and chanting, and gradually becoming more and more absorbed in hearing and chanting about Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So any questions? Yes, sir.
Hare Krishna, thank you. I have two questions. One is that we're speaking about different species, and it's mentioned there's 400,000 species of human beings. What does that mean exactly?
Well, what do people think when you say species of human beings? Materially speaking, what do they think?
Probably racist.
Racist, same thing. There's a Caucasian, is that what it's called? Mongoloid, and what's the other one called? Huh? The Africans, what are they called? Come on. We're talking scientific terminology here. Caucasians are the Indian European breed, Mongoloid is the Chinese breed, and then species. That's one way of looking at it. We don't look at it like that. Or we don't understand it like that. And then there's, that's kind of based on color, but not entirely, because the Indians are also Caucasians. They're the same as European breed, as far as that goes. And the Chinese are not. They're Mongoloid, different structure. They have a different physical structure. And the same with the Africans, different physical structure. So those three are the most common. And then there's so many mixtures, of course, so many mixtures. But doesn't describe 400,000 species. Even if you take that as a parameter for this, for definition, which it's not exactly anyway. But even if you do, it's a state of, generally understood, of consciousness, state of consciousness. Usually the body form has a relationship with that, but not always so clearly defined. Different states of consciousness. People receive particular bodies, human-like forms in different planets of the universe. It's not referring just to the Earth planet, of course it's not. Demigods obviously are not on the Earth planet in general, or people in the lower planetary systems. We'll speak of hellish forms, human forms, human-like forms. And amongst those you can read Rupa Goswami's teachings to Rupa Goswami, and consequently from him, is amongst those 400,000, the majority are not considered civilized. Only a small percentage is civilized. And amongst the civilized, which are really those who are following Varnashram or religious principles, very, very few are serious about it as lip service. And of those who are serious, most of them have totally material motivation. So these are all different levels of, or species of life when it comes to, taking it from a consciousness point of view. So it doesn't matter where you come from. If you're civilized, if you're behaving civilized according to the Vedic standard anyway, and you're inquiring to the nature of absolute truth, you're considered to be on the highest, or amongst the highest rung of human civilization, or human beings, high up there, even above the demigods, if one's actually on that platform. So it's based mainly on consciousness, on evolution of consciousness. It's not like in the species of animals or whatever, which is almost 100% the same. One's consciousness and one's form are more or less one and the same. You're a fish. You don't think about being a dog or an elephant or human. You're a fish, and you only think fish. That's your level, full stop. And then there are so many varieties of fish, but you're not like, associating doesn't make no difference, even if it does in the next lifetime, maybe, but in that particular lifetime, if a trout, there's a word trout, a fish called a trout. Yeah. A trout associates with a shark, it doesn't start developing the mood of a shark. Yeah. They're fixed in their, conditioning. And human beings who are uncivilized are pretty much like that too. They're pretty dull. But the whole purpose of civilized human life is to change one's consciousness, how you see things. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Marsh. So it's consciousness. One, I think that, consciousness, so there's like categories of consciousness, because I think every individual has a different consciousness, so there's unlimited species of human beings in that sense, if you could, you know what I mean? It's like, but it's like categories.
Yeah, well, there's consciousness is, basically most species is not come to the surface practically. It's hidden. It's kind of covered over so much so by whatever condition one's in. There's not really any execution of free will within that position which they're in. But in the human form of life, then consciousness can start to awaken, and start to grow like a plant underground. You can't see anything. And it starts to grow, and if it's properly cultivated, it may end up being a beautiful flower or whatever it is. If it's not properly looked after also, it won't. It will return to the earth. It won't make it, it won't grow. It will grow and it won't be anything of any value. You can say it's a tomato plant, but what's the use if there's no tomatoes coming from it? It doesn't mean nothing. So in human life also, what's the use if you're not doing, it is what it is. That's what you're going to get. If there's no tomatoes, then you're going to have to take birth in another body, a different plant, maybe whatever, thorn bush or something. But if you want to get tomatoes, you've got to act in a way to get tomatoes. You've got to water it, you've got to protect it, you've got to do this and that. Even though it is potentially a tomato plant, you still usually have to be a little careful about it, making sure it gets what it needs. So yeah, in human form of life, that's what it's meant for. It's meant to, evolve in consciousness. The animals, it's not like, you don't sit down, unless you're Francis of Assisi or something, you don't sit down and start preaching to a goldfish, Okay, where are all the goldfish this morning? Bhagavatam class is starting. Bring the goldfish. You bring 50 bowls of goldfish. What difference will it make to them? There's some remote benefit, maybe some sound vibration will pass through their consciousness. They have no awareness of what it is, or thoughts, oh, fantastic, the holy name has entered my consciousness, and they start flying out of the water in ecstasy or something. Doesn't usually happen. They're so dull, but it does. It floats through their consciousness. That's about all you can say. So it has that, obvious a beneficial effect, but they don't have any conscious awareness in relationship to it. They're not going to embrace it, generally speaking. But it's good fortune nonetheless. With human form of life, it's the same with most people. They're as dull as fish, practically speaking, as dull as a fish. That's why it's said they're not really inhuman. They're human body, and they're very low down there, almost animal mentality or lower, almost. And that's what the body you get next life round. And the idea is to wake up and, try to be conscious. Human form of life is meant, life of responsibility is meant to be understanding what our real responsibility. To the degree that a person takes their responsibility, they're becoming elevated in the cycle of human form of life. And if they get the good fortune to associate with transcendentalists, then that can be, and they take advantage of it, that can be rapidly, they can even attain liberation. Even though that when we are good examples of that, coming from a very degraded, potentially a very good opportunity, but a very degraded lifestyle, very degraded. So, I mean, we see that many people are so intoxicated with either drugs or liquor or just material sense enjoyment itself, not any necessarily intoxicant. They just have no interest, no time whatsoever for spiritual life, isn't it? You meet them all the time on Sankirtan, right? You meet them practically all the time. They have no interest. You're trying to find another way to capture their attention. You know, it's not easy. Their minds are just in another world. And they're just not interested. There's not even a glimmer. It seems like they don't even recognize your presence. They've got things in their ears or something walking by, earplugs or whatever it is. I think it's some kind of sound that they're listening to up there. Music or whatever, I don't know. Different things, they're so dull. And then some people are not so dull. They're considered to be a little more elevated in the species of human beings, or they may be ready to hear. What to say. And if you don't take advantage in the human life of hearing when you're supposed to, or following principles when you're supposed to, then you lose that opportunity. So you're either so dull, because there's other factors involved, no doubt about karma is very no one can fully understand the workings of karma, but in principle, if one doesn't take advantage of the human form of life, then one doesn't get it next time round. One has to go through the species again according to your karma and desire. It's usually what it is. Anything else? It's consciousness. Huh?
Thank you very much. The other question was about going back to Godhead from the heavenly planets.
We're going home back to Godhead. We used to sing that during Kirtan. Can you imagine? Evening Arti, Pushta Krishna Maharaj, when he was in England, he used to leading Gaur Arti, and he'd sing, "We're going home back to Godhead, moing, moing," hit the gong, mong, mong. We're going home back to Godhead. Okay, heavenly planets.
Yes. So I thought basically, I mean, there's some exceptions, but usually only on the this Earth planet you can actually go back to God, and lower and upper planetary systems they just act for experience your karma. So once that is exhausted, then you go back to Earth, and from there. So you can actually be elevated from material world, material heavenly planets to spiritual world.
That sounds a good stepping stone. As you say, that's generally what we hear, and that's generally understood. But this Earth planet is like the, what do you call it? The junction. And from here you go up, you can go down, or you can get out. It's like the room, sometimes you go into a room where they decide whether you're going this way or that way, or out, release. So yes, usually this human form of life on this earthly plane is we even hear about demigods aspiring to take birth on the earthly planet at different times for that reason, or residents of the heavenly planets. But it's clearly obvious it isn't impossible to go back to God, especially from the heavenly planets. It's not impossible from any platform if one gets the opportunity and takes advantage of the association of a pure devotee of the Lord. There are certainly pure devotees in the heavenly planets. I mean, Narada Muni is always floating around, here, there, and everywhere, and there are many others too. Lord Brahma is a pure devotee. He may not be acting in the way of as apparent, pure sadhana bhakti or something, but he is a pure devotee of the Lord. So if one gets the fortune of taking advantage of that aspect of their association, then one can. Why not? One can be elevated beyond the material plane. But generally speaking, you're right, that's what we understand from whatever you read and hear, is that the Earth planet is more suitable for this for various reasons, and some of them are quite obvious. In heavenly planets you do. I mean, even in Krishna consciousness movement today, we often become a little bit over attached to it, or trying to create a comfort zone. Maybe we've got a relatively good comfort zone, like here in Switzerland. You may have a relatively good comfort zone, materially speaking, compared to, say, what would you compare it with? France? I don't know. Somewhere else, you know. It may be relatively comfortable. If you go to Hawaii, that was one of, I think that's probably where Prabhupada was talking about the problem with my disciples is they want to go to heaven. Because, you know, you're living in Hawaii. I don't know if any of you have been to Hawaii. Maybe that's where all the devotees are this morning. I don't know where they all are. Maybe they've gone to Hawaii or something. But if you live in a place called Hawaii, you know, it's not so easy to, you know, devotees in Russia before this glasnost, just the few I've heard from, said they felt much more Krishna conscious before than they did after. Although they were appealing and endeavoring to try to get so-called freedom, they somehow or another they felt more Krishna conscious in that difficult situation under pressure like that. And when there was freedom, then, you know, they just got kind of caught up with, well, now social media, maybe not them, but all kinds of other things came into their lives which were, you know, maybe not quite so full-on Krishna conscious, you know. So, yeah, if you're in the heavenly planets, then for sure, in general, you're going to be, you know, you don't want to lose what you've got. You've got a really nice situation up there. Yeah, it's nice. Jai Shri Krishna. But, you know, jai to my enjoyment as well, you know. Thank you, Krishna. If you've got the time to think about that. You're too busy enjoying yourself. And if you're in hellish planets, you're too busy trying to tolerate, survive, and get out of there, whatever it is. You know. Oh, you're just overwhelmed. It's like on this planet, Prabhupada says, you know, you can't really preach to someone who's starving. If someone's on, you know, if they're a devotee, it's different, but an ordinary person, you can't really, you know, their only thoughts, give me food, give me food. And Prabhupada even said that's what we have to do with such people. We have to give them food. You don't try to preach to them, you give them food. If they're dying, they're starving, all they can think of filling their belly. How can they? You say, don't worry about that, you're not your body, chant Hare Krishna. Mm-hmm. They're not at that point. They're not at that point. So it's like something like that. They have a heavenly, hellish planets. You try preaching, you go on the beach, you know, you go on the beach in Hawaii, or you go on the beach in Byron Bay, or, you know, Sunshine Coast, or Surfer's Paradise in Australia. So it's kind of like a joke. You know, the devotee, this scrawny looking kind of, you know, scrappy looking devotee, goes on the street with a book, you know, kind of, hey, take a book. What's this about, mate? Oh, this will help you to be happy. He looks at you, you know. And there he is, you know, he's a sun-tanned, you know, big, muscular, handsome-looking guy with a beautiful girl in his arm, you know, he just got money falling out of his pockets. He got, you know, the best surfboard on the market in one arm, and a girl in the other, you know. And you're trying to convince him this, you know, he's not happy. It's just like, I feel sorry for you, mate. Here, take $1, you know. I feel sorry for you, you know. Never mind. Here, buy yourself a beer. Here, take $5. Go and get the beer and be happy. You know, they're not. It doesn't mean anything, you know. They're in that space at that moment, you know. It's very hard. I mean, yeah. There's another thing going on behind the scenes, of course, but from the external point of view, it's pretty hard to expect them to take that kind of a, you know, an argument or a justification, you know. You want me to be like you? You know what I mean? It doesn't appeal to them. Well, you guys are happy? Yeah, well, what do you do? Well, we don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't hang out with girls, we don't go to parties, we don't surf, we don't eat, in restaurants, we don't go to cinemas, we don't go to nightclubs, we don't drive fancy cars, we don't go on holiday. Really? What do you do? Well, we sleep on the floor, we take cold showers, we get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, boys and girls don't associate with each other at all, and we sit down chanting all day long. And unless we're asked to do something else. What do you think, Savia?
It sounds bizarre.
It would if you're in that situation, wouldn't it? Until you suddenly get bitten by a shark when you're out there on your surfboard and no one can help you. God save me! You should have listened to that scrawny-looking little Hare Krishna stood there on the street. A bit late then. But, when you're in it, it's pretty intoxicating. Tremendously intoxicating. We see look at Nalakavara and Manigriva, my God. Elevated, even demigods, and even they lost it. Okay, we've got to finish. We've got to drive all across the mountains today. Krishna's grace. The weather report's changed, by the way, since yesterday. It changed, as it usually does. Yeah. Well, it might have changed again since 3 o'clock this morning, but it has changed. You can guarantee, almost guarantee that, weather report, you can almost predict the opposite in many cases. It's like that in the material world. Never know what's coming next. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you all for your